Grade 5 podcast, college edition here on YouTube. Nate Jacobson next to me that way. I'm Ben Wittenstein. Nate, we have made it to conference championship week. What a time. The weather is 15 degrees. It's freezing outside. I got the heat blasting. Got a sweatshirt on. Which means it's conference championship football time, man. We made it through multiple weeks of college football. Won bets, lost bets, had a good time, and we're finally down to the best teams in the country now playing this weekend.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. We finished the sprint that is the college football regular season, and I feel like there's a lot more, maybe not excitement necessarily for this weekend alone, but I think what's upcoming with the 12-team playoff and the those 11 games that we're going to see through December and January over like a 4-week stretch. But this weekend's kind of weird just because there's a lot of teams that already know they're in, and it's kind of one game. And I think we're going to talk about it right at the top. That's kind of like the biggest game in terms of knowing who's going to represent that conference in the playoff, but also will decide maybe the 12th team that makes the college football playoff, which based on the rankings show on Tuesday night will probably be Alabama as the team that isn't playing this weekend. That's going to be rooting for a certain team to try to make the 12-team field.
It's always weird, I feel like, this weekend, the conference championship weekend, just because, especially now with the multiple team playoff, a lot of these games, some teams may even not want to be playing this weekend so they don't get a loss on their resume. And it's weird because, Tuesday, everyone's talking about college football playoff, what teams are going to be in, top 12. And then you realize, wait, this weekend we got other games to play. We got conference championship games to play. We can't just start talking about the college football playoff this early. It's kind of like a weird dynamic going on.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier, how I know when Ohio State lost, then it opened the door for one of Penn State or Indiana to make it. And Penn State was a big favorite against Maryland, and they have the tiebreaker. So they won that game, and they're the team that's replacing, I guess, Ohio State from what we expected. But like if Indiana made the conference title game, then they'd be in real danger if they lost that game of like the committee finding a way to keep them out. So I feel like Indiana is the team that's really happy they're not risking a Big Ten title game, even if it would be for a first-round bye, just because they'd be a pretty significant underdog to Oregon, even though that game's in their own backyard. So, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it. We're going to preview all 5 of the big conference championship games, including the Big Four and then the Mountain West, because that feels like a winner goes to the playoffs scenario with what happened with Tulane losing on Thanksgiving night. To kind of knock out the American as a potential playoff representative. So looking forward to talking about these 5 games and kind of just previewing the game in general, not really having like a strong lean, but maybe talking ourselves into some potential bets as it's only Wednesday. So we have a little bit of time before these games kick off on Friday night and Saturday.
Watch us figure out what we like to bet in real time. That's all part of the fun of the show.
It's always good to see how the sausage is made.
Absolutely. And speaking of one of those teams that might benefit from not even playing in a game like this, let's start with ACC championship picks for number 5.
Number 5.
All right, Nate. Clemson, SMU, Mustangs come into this game, and there's been a lot of chatter about them losing this game and then bumping themselves out of the college football playoff. I would be kind of shocked if that happened because it would change completely how teams think of these conference championship games.
So you would be surprised if SMU lost and finished the season 11-2, including a loss in their 13th game. And then in the next rankings, the final rankings reveals show that they would drop below Alabama.
Correct. Because if in that scenario, you could make the argument about how a team losing in a conference championship game is more detrimental to them not even playing. We've seen the committee talk about how they don't have any future data points for some of these teams who are not in conference championships, so they can't move them up or down. So why would you be punishing a team that's good enough to make a conference championship and then lose?
I mean, that's a fair question. My response would be, look what happened last year when I know Alabama did play a SEC title game. They beat Georgia, but they jumped from 8-4 over Florida State, who won their game and finished 13-0 in the regular season. And we've seen in the past how the committee's kind of treated this like a TV show. And if the choice is, do we send Alabama to South Bend maybe to play Notre Dame as the 6th seed or SMU and just kind of the TV interest, what's going to happen. I think that SMU has to win this game to feel good about themselves going into Sunday morning. And if they do win this game, they'll be the 3 seed. And they're playing Clemson, who last week they lose to South Carolina in a game that didn't matter for ACC purposes. That game, regardless, I mean, it was a big game, obviously a rivalry game in state. They lose the game despite being up for most of the second half. And then later in the afternoon, crazy 4 hours for Clemson, you lose to your biggest rival in state. And then Miami blows a 21-0 lead to give you kind of a new life to make the AC title game in Charlotte, 2.5 hours down the road, to play SMU for a shot at maybe a bye in the first round of the college football playoff. So, yeah, I mean, I like Clemson here. This is my favorite bet of the week. It's not like my favorite bet of the year or anything, but slim pickings this week. All the numbers are pretty much right. But I do think we're getting a little bit of line value here on Clemson because how they lost to South Carolina last week was pretty much a toss-up game against a pretty good South Carolina team. I just think Clemson's more talented. They're going to have a hidden home field advantage. They're in the ACC title game a lot, specifically in this stadium. I feel like the pressure that's going to happen is kind of mounting for SMU, where a lot of people might say, like, you're in the playoff no matter what. Even if you lose, you'll be an at-large. I just don't know if I buy that. And obviously SMU is going to try to win this game and want to get a bye in the first season in the ACC. But I just like Clemson in this spot getting points. So I'm going to take Clemson plus the 2.5 is my favorite bet for the week. I know we talked a little bit about some of the off the field stuff, the noise for this game in terms of the playoff stuff, but do you have any thoughts on how you think this game's going to play out?
I like the Clemson pick a lot because I do think these teams are a little bit closer than even the number indicates. Obviously, it's under 3, but still getting 2.5 points with a Clemson team that's just looked better and better as the weeks have gone on. And I really do. I like SMU. I said on the show I took them laying a double-digit points against the Virginia team, and a lot of people, I saw a lot of smart people think maybe Virginia was going to cover that number, and SMU just blew them out of the water. So I really like this SMU defense. I think their offense can really compete as well. But Clemson is just, to me, they're very battle-tested. They've seemingly kind of changed and adapted this team throughout the season to become better than what we saw at the start of the year. And a team like that just kind of rolling, as much as I hate, talking good things about Dabo, he's done a very good job with this team. And I think getting them as a dog in a championship game, a spot they've been before, they like the bright lights. They know how to play in these scenarios, facing kind of a first-time team in this scenario, getting points. I like it.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for for SMU is just who they've played. They didn't play Clemson in the regular season. They didn't play Miami. You look at their conference games, and they beat Florida State. Obviously, before the year, we thought that'd be a tough game for SMU, and it turned out not to be because the Seminoles went 2-10. They did beat Louisville at Louisville. That was probably their most impressive win. But then the last 6 games beat Stanford, Duke, Pitt, who just really fell off at the end of the season. Boston College by 10, but that was a 3-point game late, and that was at home with Boston College as backup quarterback. They beat Virginia, as you mentioned, and then they beat Cal, but Cal was coming off a storm-the-field win against Stanford, so I don't know how much they had left in the tank for this game. So I think there's some serious questions about who SMU played. They could definitely quiet us and take care of business, win, make the playoff. No doubt on Sunday morning or early afternoon what's going to happen with the playoff, where Clemson, their only path is win this game. If they lose, they're out of the picture, and it's Alabama probably getting that last spot. So fascinating game. I think it's funny how the ACC, it's been a championship game that sometimes has been very insignificant, but now this is kind of the biggest game, not just on who's going to make the playoff, but like the domino effect of who's going to get that last spot. And it's very fitting this game is the last game of the schedule on Saturday, because it's kind of a nice build up with all the other games beforehand.
Absolutely. All right, Nate, let's go to our next one.
Number 4.
The classic, the Big Ten championship, Oregon, Penn State. And if you had read thegamingjuice.com earlier on in the fall, almost at the end of the summer, you could have seen Nate and myself both say that we love the Oregon Ducks to win the Big Ten. Now, I ask you, Nate, on December 4th, as we record this, after we wrote that article back in August, do you still like Oregon to win the Big Ten championship?
I do like them to win this game against Penn State. I'm a little bit hesitant to lay the 3.5, which is currently out there. If it gets to
agree.
-3, I'd consider it, but I also bet Oregon before the year to win the Big Ten, along with writing that article. So don't feel like I need to put any extra money on Oregon, but also at the same time, don't feel the need to take any Penn State plus the points or money line to try to middle or hedge out of this. It's I don't know. Oregon is obviously a very good team. I'm a little bit worried though. Penn State is maybe, I don't know. It's a really hard game for me to come up with. I will say one thing with Oregon that I like is their offense has slumped a little bit in November towards the end of the season. There was some, lackluster performances, specifically one at Wisconsin. But they did get Tez Johnson, their star wide receiver, back for the game against Washington, and they were awesome offensively. And I feel like his presence kind of opens up the whole offense because he's such a good player. And because of that, I feel like Oregon is a true title contender and probably one of the justified favorites. I believe they're maybe the favorite to win the title, especially after Ohio State's loss last week. So yeah, I mean, I like Oregon. I'm not really going to bet this though, but it would never be Penn State for me. That's kind of a quick way to put it. I don't have too much, but hopefully you have some Oregon from the summer if you're listening.
Yeah, and I do like Oregon. And like you said, -3.5. I don't love them laying that extra hook against Penn State, a team that can kind of be feisty here and there if they really need to be. But I'm more than happy with betting on Dan Lanning in this game. So I like to find kind of different spots for this Oregon team that maybe isn't laying the 3.5. And a couple of spots that have been pretty profitable from them this season has been their first half team total, first half spread as well, and maybe just team total in general. I know we kind of talked about some of their offensive issues, but because Penn State's defense has been pretty good this season, you're getting Oregon's number a little bit lower. You can get them at -13.5 for the first half for their point total, for their team total, which I don't hate. I think Oregon is a team that could come out, especially on the turf in Indianapolis, where it's fast-paced football. Their guys are going to be blowing past some of these Penn State defenders. I like -13.5 just to get 2 scores in that first half, really start the game hot. It's something they have done all season long. They average 23 points per first half this season. They love to start games fast. So I don't see why this type of game is any different. This is a game Dan Lanning and company have been eyeing since day one of the football season this year. So it's not like something they're going to be overlooking. They want to keep that number 1 spot. I don't think any of that's an issue. And I do think Penn State's, Oregon's schedule hasn't been that great and that hard, but it's been a little bit more difficult than Penn State's. So I think Penn State's defense is going to struggle a little bit with this Oregon offense.
What's kind of interesting here, just kind of looking ahead, is if Oregon wins, they'll be the 1 seed. But if you're the 1 seed, you might have to play the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee, based on how the bracket is. So yeah, even though if Oregon is the 1 seed, obviously there'll be an advantage having a bye. I believe that game would be the Rose Bowl, so wouldn't be too far travel for them, but definitely maybe not the best place to be in terms of where you want to be in the bracket. So I would hold off on betting any Oregon futures in terms of winning the title. If they do lose, they would be the 5 seed, I would guess, because I don't think Notre Dame would jump them, or the SEC loser would be definitely wouldn't be ahead of them. So I know it's an extra game, but this year you actually might want to be the 5 seed in terms of most likely chance of winning the national title. And in terms of Penn State, they win, they could be the 1 or 2 seed depending on what happens in the SEC game. And if they lose, I'm curious to see if Penn State loses, do they also fall behind Notre Dame? And does Notre Dame the 5 seed and Penn State the 6? Because as I mentioned, you kind of want to be the 5 seed. Most likely, well, maybe something crazy happens, but yeah, just kind of some things to look ahead where I've stayed away from betting any futures in terms of the national title in college football, because I do really want to see that bracket, because I feel like there's going to be some sort of unbalance to it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to our number 3 play.
Number 3.
Nate, we're going down to the Big 12. Iowa State, Arizona State. This one's going to be fun. I feel like we're both kind of looking forward to this game. We got Kenny Dillingham versus Matt Campbell. Iowa State, first 10-win season in history. Campbell kind of got that 10-win season under his belt now. He's got that momentum. He's got that team. Rocco Becht looking good. Who do you like in a game like this where it's a short spread, -2 in favor of Arizona State, 51's the total? How are you kind of attacking this game?
So if I had to bet the game, I would look towards the Iowa State side as an underdog. The first thing that was a key piece of news that came out this week: the best wide receiver on Arizona State, Jordan Tyson. He's out for the season. I was looking through the stats of Arizona State's wide receivers, and like he blew away the guys who are behind him in terms of receptions and touchdowns and yards. So I feel like that's a big loss where Iowa State's defense could focus in on Cam Scatabo, the star running back for the Sun Devils, and kind of force Sam Levitt to try to beat them with other receivers who aren't as good as Tyson. So off the bat, I just kind of like Iowa State as the underdog. It's just kind of crazy, though, Arizona State's in this game because before the year, their win total was 4.5, and it was juiced under. Like there was money on the under for Arizona State all summer. So just kind of crazy that we've gotten to this point. I think it just kind of speaks to the randomness that the Big 12 was. But yeah, at the current price, if you see a plus sign by Iowa State's money line, I would just grab the Cyclones on the money line. Not a real strong bet, but if I want to have action on that game, that is the way I would go.
It is funny if you had told someone back in August that you would see an Indiana and an Arizona State in the college football playoff. People would think you're nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just been kind of a crazy year like that.
It's been great.
I think it's really because, not to take anything away from some of these teams, but based on your schedule with so many teams in the league, there's going to be so much unbalance in the schedule. And in the Big 12's case, like going into the season, it looked like a team like Kansas was going to have a favorable schedule. But all those teams like a BYU and Arizona State that we thought were going to be 4 or 5 win teams all ended up overachieving. So it made those schedules a lot harder. Arizona State and Iowa State had 2 of the easier Big 12 schedules if you just kind of look at teams' win-loss records, but not much separates any of these teams in the Big 12. So yeah, it's just like something to look forward to, or looking ahead how to bet maybe like win totals where you're going to have to really try to figure out the schedule stuff, but at the same time, be open to maybe being completely wrong on some teams who overachieve and underachieve just because of the nature of the roster turnover and everything else going on in college football.
Yeah, and I wrote some stuff down for a game like this, and I think we're on a similar page. I think losing a wide receiver of that caliber for Arizona State is going to be tough for them. But I also think, you look at both of these teams, Nate, and to me, they're very similar. They're very close in talent and ability, and obviously, I think give them 100 chances. Iowa State wins 50, Arizona State probably wins 50 of these games. So if I can get Iowa State, get some points with them, I think I'm going to take that situation, especially get them on underdog on the money line. I just have liked the way Iowa State has fought this season. I think they're a bit more battle tested, and I really like the way that they are finishing the year as well. And you look at some of their numbers, both teams, if you're looking for a total play, maybe you don't like the spread. If you're looking for a total play, maybe you bet the over 51, because you look at both these teams' defenses, and neither team has a really strong defense on 3rd or 4th down. They both struggle to get off the field on 3rd or 4th down. Their success rate defensively on those late downs is outside the top 50 for both those teams. And also Iowa State's running game, or ASU's running game, I should say, as we talked about, maybe Iowa State can focus more defending the running game. Even if they do that, though, the numbers defensively for Iowa State against the run are not very good. Arizona State runs the ball 13th most in the nation. Iowa State's defensive success rate against the run is 84th in the country, and they're 112th in opponents' yards per rush. They give up they give up more than 5 yards per rush defensively, Nate. So there's a way for Arizona State to attack this Iowa State defense, and it's going to be on the ground. And even when you lose a wide receiver that caliber, maybe they're still able to move the ball semi-efficiently. But then we know Iowa State's offense can probably hit back. So I like the Iowa State side, but if you don't love a side on the spread, I do think the over is the play for the total.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that, or wanting to talk you out of that. Just looking for a good game. It's one of the early games at Jerry World on Saturday.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. All right, let's go to our next conference championship.
Number 2.
It's going out to the West, to the Mountain West. What's turned out to be a kind of a fun conference this year. Obviously, Boise State's been unbelievable, and rushing game has been out of this world. But UNLV has been putting up a bit of a fight in that conference as well. So, Nate, as you look at this, it's Boise State, I believe, laying 4 points. The last time I checked, 58 is around the total. Yep. Is there a side or total you like in this one?
Yeah, I actually like UNLV a little bit in this game. I'm glad that UNLV is the opponent, because there was a few weeks ago when Colorado State was undefeated in a Mountain West play, and they were not going to play UNLV or Boise State this season. And luckily, in terms of making this game more entertaining, they lost to Fresno State late on a Saturday night. It's allowed UNLV to finish tied with them in the standings, and based on the tiebreaker, UNLV is going to be going up to Boise State. This game is going to be played on the Smurf turf, the blue turf in Boise.
Let's go.
And not on a neutral field. Winner of the game makes the playoff. Boise State in line for a bye if they win this game. These two teams met earlier late in October on a Friday night. Boise State closed as a road favorite in Vegas, won by 5 points. It was a game, though, UNLV was up in the fourth quarter, and Boise State came back and won. And I think my first initial response was, if Boise State was laying 4 in Vegas, then maybe there's a discount on them laying 4 at home against UNLV. But I feel like since that game, Boise State's just kind of fallen off and are trending in the wrong direction. Obviously, they have a Heisman contender in Ashton Genty, who's awesome, but I feel like he's slowed down a little bit. I know he left a game a few weeks ago with an ankle injury, so he might not be 100%. But you look at some of their last 4 games, they beat Nevada by 7 points as a huge favorite. They beat San Jose State by 21 in a game that I know some people had San Jose State plus 14.5 and somehow lost, even though Boise State was losing by 7 at one point. Next week, Boise State only beat Wyoming by 4 points as a 3-touchdown favorite. And then last week, they failed to cover against Oregon State. So I know Genty's been great, but I do respect UNLV head coach Barry Odom, especially as a defensive mind. I think they're going to do everything they can to stop Genty and force Maddox Madsen to try to beat them. So I do like UNLV here. There was a lot made earlier in the season when their quarterbacks, Luka, left the program and transferred, but it turned out I think that was a blessing for UNLV because Haj Malik Williams took over as quarterback, and he's been very good for the Rebels and kind of just a more dynamic passer for them. So I do like UNLV here plus the 4. Probably like Clemson a little bit more in terms of like strength of what I like, but probably my second favorite bet would be UNLV plus the points this week.
Ooh, I like it. It almost seems like when you look at a game like this where you're like, all right, like you said, back in Vegas, they were 4-point favorite. They go back home, 4-point favorite again. We know how good Boise State can be, especially on the ground. It feels a little trappy. It feels like one of those things where you're like, people may see this and they know how good Boise State is, and they hear about the run game and everything about that. And so kind of a more reactionary person might see that and just put a bunch of money on Boise State, but it's a revenge game for UNLV. They've seen this team before. They may know different ways to defend them a little bit better. I don't hate that play. I don't hate taking the points in a game like this where maybe the two teams are a little bit closer than we might think, especially since you have that familiarity of a game already played.
Yeah, they played each other in the Mountain West title game last year as well.
Yeah,
I believe they did. Yeah, because this is their third meeting in the last year. They had the regular season meeting this year. And I think, the thing is just Boise State kind of quietly hasn't played well. And I'm not sure if a lot of people know that because everyone knows Ashton Genty's having a great season, but he's fallen off a little bit. Yeah, so you're not paying attention to the final score as long as Boise State's winning. So I think there's just some hidden I wouldn't say value at this point because Boise State UNLV has taken money from some of the opening numbers. But yeah, I feel like that's the side. I feel like they have a pretty good shot of winning, but maybe it's Boise State in a close game because they have found ways to win close games over the month of November.
Number 1.
Number 1, kind of fitting. We were going in alphabetical order, but it is fitting that this is our number 1 game of the weekend. And of course, we have to talk about the SEC championship. Texas versus Georgia. You talk about a rematch of teams in the Mountain West. Well, there's a rematch of teams in the SEC back in October 19th, I believe, is the last time these teams played. Georgia won it 30-15. Do we see a revenge game from Texas? Because, Nate, I'll tell you right now, last week I took Texas minus 122 on the money line. It shot up just a little bit. I think the lowest money line you can get is minus 130, minus 135. So it hasn't gone up by too much. But I do really like the Longhorns in this game.
Yeah, so it's not a strong bet, but I'm going to be on the opposite side, if anything. But what's holding me back is just a lot of questions on which Georgia team's going to show up. We've seen, against Texas, they probably played their best game of the year. They played a really good game against Tennessee when their backs were against the wall. Kind of think about what happened last week, Georgia Tech on a Friday night, where maybe they were looking ahead of this game, but it just was not a good performance from Georgia, and they got extremely fortunate to win that game. And the Ole Miss game was a disaster, and the first 18 minutes against Alabama was absolutely brutal. So I feel like it's just kind of how Georgia can start. Can they start off well like they did against Texas and make Texas kind of be one-dimensional and have a huge pass rush edge? I will look at just some of the injury stuff. Left tackle for Texas, Calvin Banks, he went out against Texas A&M. Their backup did pretty good in the game against A&M, but I feel like this is a little bit of a different story against Georgia's pass rush, which is the strength of their team, at least the strength of their defense. I also just have some general offensive questions about Texas, where, they scored 17 against A&M. They probably could have scored more. It just hasn't been like as sharp as maybe a lot of people think from a Steve Sarkisian offense with returning quarterback and Quinn Ewers. And also, we're getting a little bit of maybe a hidden home field advantage for Georgia. Probably not even hidden home field. Like the game's in Atlanta. Georgia's very used to playing in that building. They were there in week 1 against Clemson. They're in the SEC title game almost every year, so a lot of familiarity just with the surroundings there, and probably will have more fans in the crowd. So this is one where I'm waiting to see if there's like a opportunity to get Georgia at +3, and maybe there'll be some more interest on Texas. But it's just kind of like, what Georgia are we going to get? Because if we get Georgia at their best, I think they win this game. But if we get something from Georgia last week, where Georgia might be like, all right, we're okay, we're in the playoff no matter what, we can still lose this game, then maybe there's an opportunity where Texas kind of cements themselves as a newcomer in the SEC, winning the conference title and having a bye and getting revenge over Georgia from that ugly game in Austin about 6-7 weeks ago.
Yeah, and the thing is when you look at a game like this, and you mentioned some of those points, but I do think the revenge aspect, it can only go so far. But I do think, especially from what we saw in that game back in mid-October, Texas's start to that game, and I mean the first half start, was horrendous. They turned the ball over. They punted a bunch. They did not look good, and Georgia took advantage of a lot of their turnovers and a lot of their punting situations. And even when Georgia screwed up and threw picks, Texas got the ball back and turned the ball over themselves. So I think we see a different Longhorns team going into this game. And I do like Texas money line, but what I love is the Texas first half. And I think some of the numbers have been catching on to that play, because you can get Texas first half money line at like -150, -156. So the number isn't great. I might take the spread at -2.5, but we talked about like, what Georgia team are we going to see? And even when Georgia has won, even in the past month, it seems like they just can't start games outright. It seems like they struggle to start games. They fall behind, or they just keep it close through halftime. That Texas game was really one of the only games Georgia has played where they just shot out of a cannon and played amazing and scored a bunch of points in the first half. So I think we see a complete reversal of that this weekend, where Texas has a strong start. They remembered that game from October where they just didn't start strong. They limit turnovers. They start strong. The passing game gets going. They pass on a Georgia defense that is vulnerable to it at some times. I like the Texas first half a lot in this one. I wish the money line number was a little lower, but I might take -2, -2.5 for that first half spread for Texas.
Yeah, the scoring drives for Georgia in the first half of that game, 13-yard touchdown, because there was I forgot exactly what happened, but I remember there's a turnover. 13-yard drive ended in a field goal. They had a touchdown. That was a 34-yard drive, another field goal drive. That was 25-yard drive, and then another field goal at the end of the half. That was a 4-yard drive.
Yeah,
so,
all the scoring was off turn. It was just off.
Turnovers, short fields. They try to get a spark by bringing in Arch Manning. That moment was too big for him. George. Yeah, it's that's why that's like some of the stuff that's keeping me off Georgia in this game. Just maybe there was a little bit of luck from that win against Texas. Interesting thing here, the total closed 57 for that game in Austin about 7 weeks ago, and now we're looking at 49.5.
Yeah,
I know the game did go under, but I do feel like this is definitely a depressed number from what we saw, a few weeks ago or over a month ago. It was October. So
yeah, I agree.
I don't know if I want to go full game over before it begins, but I might be looking for maybe a halftime opportunity depending on how the game goes, to maybe bet over, and maybe it opens up a little bit in the last 30 minutes.
I gave out the first half under, I believe, on that game when that hit, but it was only because Georgia could only get 23 points and Texas didn't score. So
right.
It was the total was like 28.5 in the first half, which I thought at the time was high. I just didn't know Texas wasn't going to contribute any points at all in that first half. So if I didn't look at the first half total, but based on 49.5, it's probably closer to 23, 24.5, something like
24.5. Yeah.
So that's a little low. That's a little low.
I mean, it was, I think you made a good bet just because all Georgia's drives were short field. So
that's true. That's true.
So yeah, we're looking at a first half total at 24.
I mean, if you can get 24.5, I wouldn't say that's the worst bet in the world. Georgia first half unders have been kind of a cash cow for this point, and I don't think they score 23 points again in the first half against Texas. And, Georgia's defense is good, so maybe Texas can get 10 points and Georgia gets 7. Maybe we see a low-scoring first half again. So I would do only if it's like 24.5. That's probably going to be ultra juiced, but we'll see what the line dictates. But I do agree that that's kind of it's a big difference between their first game total and this total. Now that it's under 50 is a little surprising.
Yeah, I just something to think about, because I was early in the week, I was like, this total closed 7-8 points higher. Maybe this is a good number to go over in. And it really same if there was an under. If there was a game a rematch that was super high scoring and the total went up because of that, maybe I would look to bet under in that game, thinking there was an overcorrection. But yeah, before the game, I just don't want to get there. I also just don't know what the motivation will be for both these teams. Obviously, a first round bye would be ideal, but then there's also like the safety net where if you lose, it's not the end of the world. You still maybe hosting Texas case, they would definitely host a home playoff game if they lost. And I also think Georgia would find a way to be a top 8 seed, even if they lost that game. And maybe
probably hosting Indiana as far as the everyone's predicting.
That kind of feels like the Friday night game, Indiana at Georgia, to start off the
probably
the playoff game, or Saturday afternoon on I think it's on TNT and HBO Max. That seems like
crazy.
We'll talk about that. Not next week, but I think the week after we'll have a show to break down the 4 playoff games and maybe some random bull thoughts that we have. But next week we'll definitely take off as the college football schedule takes off for every game other than Army versus Navy.
Yeah, we got a nice little week off, which will be nice. But between now and then, you can read all of our stuff at thegamingjuice.com. Brad's got NFL picks. He's got college basketball picks as well. I'll throw some NBA picks on here and there as well throughout the month of December. But until then, appreciate everyone for watching. We're excited for the conference championships. We'll be back in a couple weeks to give you our picks for bowl season, for college football playoff season. We're very excited. So for Nate, I'm Ben. Good luck, everyone, this weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.